When the elders saw the boldness of Peter and John and perceived that they were uneducated common men, they wondered. They recognized that they had been with Jesus. Then we have a problem. But seeing the man who had been healed standing beside them, they had nothing to say in opposition. One day, in a conversation with friends, when I was staying with one of them in Oxford, I heard what they were saying amongst themselves. This group was into its faith, and the conversation went something like this. They were talking about something that had just happened with one of them who wasn't present, and one of the average Oxford men around. And the posh Oxford man around was saying to this one who had a very strong working class accent, although he was actually brilliant intellectually, and I suppose the Lord Jesus rose from the dead, yes, on the third day. Yeah, that's it! And then he went on to say what he believed, and the others were commenting he had the courage to say so. Something similar had happened some years previously at one of those Oxford colleges. It was some equally posh don who was in the death of God ambit, and he had the courage to go up to the college chapel and put this notice on it, God is dead, and he actually had the courage to add his own posh name. Eventually his time was up, and after whatever bout of cancer he had, he petered out, and some idiot, as we would say in Ireland, came up and put this other notice on the same board: Professor so-and-so is dead, signed God. We can make a lot of noise, but when faced with the issue, we become suddenly silent. The Gospel gives this sending forth of this very poorly selected band of common men, as we would quantify them. And he gave this order: go into all the world and preach the gospel to the whole creation. The average wise man would look back and say, some hope. And they might even look back and look at them all and analyse their careers, at least before, and see, well, the only one who has any hope in this group is Judas. At least he can handle the money. And yet, the saying holds true: one man and God is a majority. I remember hearing this from my mother. She was coming back from chapel one Sunday evening and was keen on repeating word for word a good chunk of the sermon she'd just heard. It went something like this. The preacher was talking about the angels having a word with the Lord after he got back to heaven, the ascension, and was saying something like this to him: well, what hope is that group? And he was calmly saying, I have no hands but these. And the angels carrying on, well, look at them, there's no hope. And he was calmly answering the same thing. And the sermon was about hands. Just the other day arrived here a tea towel. It was in the midst of a basket of providence, therefore the last thing to be unearthed. And wow, it brought back the hands, because it was a tea towel from Siena, and in the pictures, as well as that of St. Catherine's Place and others I knew well, the Duomo di Siena, the Cathedral of Siena, where some years later my mother had been deeply, deeply moved by the power of the centuries in the ancient cathedral and the earthquake of music, grace, and laying on of hands that happened just there after we who were being ordained got up from the noseward position before the high altar, while all those saints went over our head in the litany. And those hands of the Archbishop of Siena were those hands coming through the centuries from the upper room. And there, at the moment, the actual moment of ordination, which happens in one paragraph, one sentence actually, with the consecratory prayer, after he's laid on his hands, something happened, and I felt it. And one was dealing there not with just what, for instance, the Baptist preacher could have done in the pulpit some years ago, but here, with that same Alpha and Omega, who has the last word, and is able to jump the centuries and act with that same power of which the Acts of the Apostles is speaking. They saw and they had nothing to say. And I'll never forget how very soon after that in Rome I heard these words from the rector of the college I was staying in, who was a missionary. We don't know the power we have. And he told one or two things about what happened on the missions. But precisely like the early apostles, they have no human means. They're up against it. Old Nick, who owns those dark lands until the gospel arrives, witchcraft. But they have other means which precisely are able to conquer. And grace in those lands actually does. And when it gets through to the people, because of their simplicity and not their poshness, things start to happen. And they now are giving us priests. Many of the testimonies which I heard from Africa, because we had also Africans in our community, at least in formation, and that simplicity opens the hearts of the door far more than our self-sufficient poshness. It's a danger to the soul, actually, to go high up in academia and therefore self-sufficiency. Not always, but often, it goes not without a certain also spiritual self-sufficiency. In other words, I'm doing well, I don't need you. And only sometimes a big crash can bring them back. C.S. Lewis, who died in Oxford in the 60s, has one great one-liner. I was the most despondent convert in Christendom. He had lost. Rather like the apostate Emperor Julian. Tu vincisti Galilei. You have conquered Galilean. Il Vangelo di oggi ci mette davanti la commissione degli Apostoli, un non senso umano. Cosa può fare questo gruppo di 11 semplici, non accademici, gente del paese, dal mare, pescatori? Niente, dice l'umanità saggia, sapiente. Però c'era una potenza in mezzo e questa potenza l'abbiamo noi. Questa settimana è arrivata questa cosa da Siena, con il Duomo di Siena sopra, e ho rivissuto i momenti in cui questa commissione anche arrivava fino a noi. E queste mani dell'arcivescovo erano quelle del Gran Maestro, e la potenza che trasmetteva veniva da questa commissione e dalla consacrazione sacerdotale e episcopale, in questo caso per lui dall'ultima cena. E lì ho sentito, non è più l'uomo. La potenza che abbiamo anche in questa cappella è quella dell'Alfa e l'Omega. E non mi dimenticherò mai la parola del rettore del collegio americano dove vivevo, missionario lui. Non sappiamo noi preti la potenza che abbiamo in mano, e raccontava le storie dell'Africa. Dio c'è, però chiede che si lasci operare, che si abbia il coraggio di chiedere e di operare nel suo nome, Lui non è in mancanza di grazia, siamo noi, i non credenti, del sacerdozio.
Hallelujah, hallelujah, give thanks to the Lord. Hallelujah, hallelujah, give praise to his name. Jesus the Lord of all the earth, he is the King of creation. Hallelujah, hallelujah, give thanks to the Lord. Hallelujah, hallelujah, give praise to his name. Spread out the God of the earth, Jesus the Son in the Son. Hallelujah, hallelujah, give thanks to the little Lord. Hallelujah, hallelujah, give praise to him.